I've had a very busy day. I was in school all day and I had to race home for this session this afternoon.
Excellent. I've been busy too. I've been talking to people in India and London, and where else was I talking to people? Coventry. So I've been online most of today, but talking to early years people about Spark and helping them with it. So we're here to talk about maths. Now, maths, unfortunately, has never been well, no, that's not true. Maths certainly wasn't my favourite subject when I was at primary school. I can remember having to learn my times tables, and if we didn't get them right, we had to stand on the chair, and if we didn't get it right, we had to stand on the table. It was awful. Mrs. Browning, her name was. And at home, I used to get tested on my times tables as well. And there is a YouTube video about it, actually. If I got 20 questions right, I would get a tortoise. I have some tortoises now. I was asked to 11s on question 20 and I didn't get it right. My sister got a tortoise quite early on, but I really struggled, mainly because I didn't understand what on earth it was all about. And I still don't know them now, but I've got a calculator. So maths for me, although I like it because it's logical as an adult and I do what I need to do, I wouldn't say I dislike maths, but I know that lots of people, practitioners, are quite worried about maths because they perhaps didn't have very good experience themselves. But we are joined by lots of teachers tonight, and obviously you have to have a maths GCSE or whatever to become a teacher, don't you? So I presume most of the audience are quite happy about maths. Let me know in the chat what you think. Anyway, Claire, what do you think? What's your experience?
Yeah, I quite like maths. Have always liked maths, loved the challenge of, you know, puzzles whenever you were young, and sad as it is, we had what we call the 11 plus here in the north of Ireland, and it was very much a test for an academic test at age 10, and I thrived on all the maths questions and all the little problems, just loved them. They were like little puzzles for me all the time. But I actually think maths is so much a part of our lives. It's so much a part of children's lives. It's in every aspect and in every inch of every room. It's even embodied in their own bodies. You know, they kind of go around in a mathematical world. So I think if we present it to them in a different way, then we don't put them off as quick. If we make it too formal too soon, then there's a real danger that we turn children off what maths is really all about.
I agree. And in fact, I was thinking this afternoon, you know, just matching two items together. You know, we ask children to classify things, don't we? But we start that with just matching things together. You know, that's almost literacy, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You have to match. You have to understand what things look like to be able to read. I wasn't very good at reading either, by the way. At 11, I hardly could read anything. Which is why this subject is which is why what I do now is so important to me, about helping adults get things right for children, because I feel it's a very much a developmental thing. I get confused actually with what is development and what is the curriculum, because I think curriculum is child development and you facilitate it. What do you think?
Yeah, this debate about curriculum has come up quite recently in quite a lot of podcasts, and I'm quite happy to hear people talking more positively now about curriculum again. For a while it was nearly a taboo subject. It has come back on the agenda, and I think it was Jan de Beale actually said that, you know, there is absolutely nothing wrong with curriculum. It is how we deliver the curriculum, how we present it to the children. That's where the problems can lie. Sometimes we present it too formally, too soon. That can sort of scare children, turn them off. But if actually we present the formal curriculum in a non-prescriptive manner, in a playful manner, then children actually absorb the curriculum very well and very easily. So, yeah, curriculum for me is not a bad thing. It's quite good because, and again, the curriculum has been written, Catherine, largely by experts who understand child development. They know what children do at certain times of certain stages. So I look at the experts who have written curriculum in the different countries and just think we need to really take note of that, but really work harder to deliver that curriculum in a non-prescriptive manner. I think that's what our job is really as practitioners.
Okay, so I just want to explore this a little bit more, really. So a curriculum would be see, I always think of a curriculum as being subjects like history, and you learn all about the Victorians. But in maths, I feel it's more linear. I'm probably not explaining myself very well, but I mean, in our software, maths is the biggest subject. We have more developmental milestones in maths than we have for any other area of learning. And I would say, and that's all how children learn it. Okay. And we've organized it so that children don't get muddled up. So, for example, a child could be colorblind, so I know colors. Well, we're talking about if we're talking about classification, I suppose it is maths, but it's a very difficult concept for children. But we encourage practitioners to use the colors where children won't muddle up, so they understand that concept. We tend to talk about when we're looking at numerals, linking 6 to a set, 1 to 6 to a set, before we would introduce number 9, for example, so the children really get a concrete understanding of what 9 is. So anyway, so what I'm trying to say is a curriculum for me is more about the topics. That's how I see it. Well, that's how I think the curriculum is perceived. Whereas I think it is child development that sets our curriculum, and the child sets our curriculum by their learning needs, by scaffolding their learning on what they already know. What do you think about that?
So, curriculum for me, and I think for most of the teachers from here, will be thinking about, we have 6 areas of the curriculum. Maths is one, or maths and numeracy, language and communication, or literacy, depending on whether you're in preschool or in primary school. We have the world around us, we have the arts, we have personal, social and emotional, or personal development, mutual understanding, and physical development. And each one of those has kind of equal status, even though we would tend to test literacy and numeracy. Those would be the ones that, whenever you sort of come through the system, those are the ones that are assessed much more frequently. So obviously are seen to be the important elements. But very much in the early years, we would see and hopefully give equal status to things like physical development, personal, social and emotional development, because we see those as kind of underpinning children's ability then to actually take on those higher level concepts which come through the maths and literacy. Within maths, I see we have strands that we work to. We look at number, we look at shape, we look at space, we look at what else? Color, we look at pattern, we look at relationships, we look at processes. So these are the big concepts that we look at within the maths curriculum. So I see that is what our curriculum is. I definitely think that the teachers who work with the children very much need to clue into what is child development. How do children develop? And so with that understanding, then they decide how they will actually deliver those strands within the curriculum. So we're talking then about pedagogy and that sort of pedagogical perspective that the practitioners take
that's
on.
the facilitating part. Yeah. We just for the film's sake and for the people from England, we have 7 areas of learning. We have 3 prime areas, which are physical development, personal, social, emotional development, and communication and language. I've said them in a peculiar order, but those are the 3. And then the specific areas of learning are focused upon for children, the little children. And then from 3 or 4, the specific areas of learning, which are maths, literacy, understanding of the world, and expressive arts and design, are also looked at. And those 4 areas are still available to the younger children, but there's no focus on those. But for me, there's a big crossover, of what happens in what. Sometimes it's really hard actually to distinguish which learning outcome actually goes under what subject sometimes.
Ours is, really, while we have 6 areas, our areas actually cover what is within year 7. So, we've looked at these many times, and the programme for 2 specialists, Adele's there tonight, we have looked at that extensively, and we've actually unpicked the development matters and the EYFS, and we've pulled out the elements that we felt lent itself best to our 2 to 3-year-old programme. And whilst we don't talk about curriculum in the developmental programme for 2-year-olds here, we talk about a developmental framework for those children. Yeah. And our 4 areas that we look at primarily are physical development, personal, social and emotional, communication and language, and exploring and thinking, which kind of pulls in some of that more sort of cognitive side of children's learning, how things work, how things move. So it kind of cuts into the maths, and it cuts across that the world around us, our understanding the world.
And in England, we have what's known as the characteristics of effective learning, like problem solving, having a go. They run a lot. So how children learn how to learn is what the characteristics is all about. And they often, I think, cross over into the maths, particularly when you're looking at problem solving and working things out for yourselves as well. Yeah, that's really okay. Right, so I presume you had a really good childhood as far as maths is concerned, as you loved it so much at the age of 10.
Yeah, probably. And I said that my mother probably was, she was very clued into how children learn. She was a nurse, but she really did understand children's learning, and I can still see her yet at 11 o'clock in the morning. She would come out of the kitchen with a little tray where she would sit down with me and my brother, who was at home at the same time, and we would sit down together with her and watch Romper Room, which was a programme with Miss Helen. She would come on and she would look through a looking glass to see who she could see. And she did little kind of games with us. And Mummy was completely tuned into that and the need to be with us at that time, So she very much understood that you didn't park a child in front of a TV and go off and leave them. She would have done things like put the big rug over the top of a table and we would have got in under it and hid, and she would have done all of that with us. And we would have been under the table, or we would have been behind the chair, or, so all that mathematical language was kind of just infused into our play at that stage. So probably I was one of those lucky people that got involved in that. And also we had a lot of sport. So you were out playing, we had a game called camogie, which you play with a stick. It's a bit like hockey. And so you were, learning how to hit the ball, long distances, run after the ball, chase, there was so many, there were 12 players on our team. And, you got very quickly to know if somebody's not there, you might get on. So, it was all kind of part and parcel of your life. Maths was all around us. And also my father had a shop. And so we were reared in the shop, doing the till, giving, taking money, giving change, pricing groceries, packing boxes, what fits, what mightn't fit. So it was kind of infused into everything that we did.
But I do think, as educators, there are educators that just know what comes next, just instinctively can help and support children. Then unfortunately, there are others that just don't have that skill and need a little bit of help and support, which is where Spark comes in to the frame really, and gives a consistent platform for everybody to work from. But I mean, I think of myself as a natural educator. I can't help, if I see a child, I can't help but offer something or explain something without spoiling any play. But you know, I can't help but move that child forward in some shape or form. I just, you know, just the way I am, I suppose. But there are lots of practitioners I know, having, you know, a big team that worked for me with the nurseries, that are really scared of maths and really avoid it. You know, so, or they avoid it consciously if they know it is, if it's termed as maths, you know. And I can remember sending, we all went on a maths course to learn about practical maths, what we could do practically with the children in their play, and provide what we could be providing them with. To the extent, actually, I made loads of maths packs where parents took a maths pack home, and they were literally things the parents could do, like line the bottles up on the side of the bath, or I can't remember what was in them now. Really simple maths games, and just things that happened in everyday life, and just to help parents with their mathematical understanding as well. So maths has been, although I've, you know, I had a hard time with maths at school, maths has been quite prominent in my career. But I know that that's not the case for a lot of practitioners. So we talked about child development. What about facilitating then?
So whenever I work with practitioners, whenever you're talking there about not everybody's experience of maths is the same. Whenever I go into schools, like for example, today in the school, we were looking at fabrics. We were looking at fabrics for outdoor play. And I showed the practitioners some photographs of children outside, and they were actually working with large sheets, just bed sheets. And the children were folding them. And so I was chatting to the practitioners today and saying, okay, so whenever they fold them, they're folding them in half, and then they fold them again and it's into quarters. And what they might fold it again, but most of the children won't necessarily know at this early stage that these are eighths. But we do have children who will figure that out. So it is really important that we listen to children, that we tune into them, that we be with the children as much as we possibly can, because there will be one or two children who will figure out, well, if that's a half, that's a quarter, this is an eighth. They kind of almost, the little cogs click, and they get that very quickly. The other thing then the children were doing in the photographs was they were actually folding the sheets and putting them into a box. So they were looking at, does it fit? Where am I placing it in the box? Will I put it in the bottom of the box, or will I put it in the top, on the top layer? So there's lots and lots of mathematical language around that. And that is the bit that we need to see as practitioners, is the simplicity of what we need to do in order to make maths meaningful for children. And the teacher turned around and said to me at the end of today, she says, you know, one thing that I've learned today is that we do a lot of this, but we don't see it. We don't recognize it as maths. And she said, you've really made me stop and think today about the simple things we do. So I just said to her, look, why don't you go around your environment, take a kind of a stock take, look at all your continuous provision that you've now set up, and see what is the potential for maths, for example, in your mud station outdoors. Look at the equipment you have. Do you have large, medium and small containers? Do you have large, medium and small jugs? Do you have large, medium and small spoons and ladles and different sizes of mortar and pestle? What's, talking about the quantities of soil that you're giving the children. Do you give them the whole bin, or do you take a small amount out and put it into a bucket? Is it a scoop, or is it 2 scoops that you're putting into the bucket? Are you going to use the pink scoop or the blue scoop, because they have a large pink one and a small blue one? So there is so much potential there. Are we going to add in some water to the mud? Are we going to use pipettes, syringes, or are we going to use turkey basters? So there you've got 3 different volume and capacity in each of those and 3 different amounts of water. And again, children will choose that. They will start to self-select, and it's watching the children. Why did they take the pipette? Why did they not use the turkey baster? Because at that point, the children know they only want a small amount of water. So it's really about tuning into where children are and really seeing what do they know. And sometimes we just need to give them the language. Oh, so you chose the pipette because you only wanted a little drop of water. And it's just about subtly moving in and giving them the mathematical language that actually is associated with what they're doing. So again, I said to move on from your mud station, go to, for example, where the bikes and trikes, take a look at what you've got available. What direction are the children going to be traveling? Are they able to travel in both directions? Are there corners to be turned? Do they have to go around the roundabout? How many people can travel in at the one time? Or how many helmets have you got? Do the helmets match the number of bicycles? Do you have small, medium and large helmets? Can the children self-select those? So everything is full of potential for maths. And then whenever they move into the loose parts container or the loose parts boutique, which is what I'm going to be doing next week, the potential there for maths is just in abundance. And we talk about maths being almost embodied. So that embodiment of maths. What does that look like? What does that feel like? So whenever the children go into the loose parts boutique and they want some logs or they want some poles, and take the logs, for example, can I carry 3 logs? Can I stretch my arms right around 3 of them? Are my arms long enough? So these are all the thoughts that children have. They're not outwardly saying them, but they're actually thinking about it. So slow down what you're doing and watch. And then you discover actually they can only carry 2 because they can get their arms around it, and off they go. But they're also making a decision about how far do I have to travel? Could I make it over there with these 2 logs? So they are subconsciously or consciously thinking, can I make it? Also, you have children who want to get den building poles. Can they lift them out? And again, we would encourage them to keep their den building poles in large bins. So they have to actually lift them upright, really high, and then check, is there anybody behind me? And look left and right. And then they move off with their pole and try and keep it safely in such a way that they can carry that out. Again, that whole embodiment of maths. So, you know, there's maths is absolutely everywhere, and it's about pointing that out for practitioners and letting them see this is not something to be afraid of. It is all around us. And what we need to do is just give all of that kind of language and support to the children and give them time to develop all those concepts.
I'm quite honoured to be a co-founder. I haven't done anything apart from help them of a school in China. And I went out last term and spent some time out there with them and have a beautiful environment. I mean, they have the most fantastic equipment, but they just don't. It's just they don't really know what to do with it. You know, they've got a beautiful home corner with the regulars in, you know, the fridge, the oven, as it happens, although a lot of homes in China, as I believe, don't actually have an oven because they tend to use woks on top a lot. They had dressing up clothes and what have you, but that was it. You know, they could have added scales. You know, they could have added saucepans of different sizes rather than have them all the same. They could have added different cooking dishes again, or woks, all at different sizes. And I'm having, it's quite a challenge to get them to see these things, because a lot of Chinese teachers, in my experience, don't remember about their own play. They don't remember playing in a home. Well, a lot of them wouldn't have had a home corner. This is an EYFS school, okay? It's not a typical Chinese school by any means. But actually helping them use the environment, not just for maths, for all subjects in a play-based way instead of whole class teaching. Still, but they had this wonderful equipment. They would still stand at the top of the class and have all the children sitting around them in a half circle. At least it wasn't lines, in a half circle, for a good proportion of a session. So I find it really quite a challenge. And I had another lady this afternoon from a nursery in London, and she wanted to know about planning. And I had to go through the planning again on Spark. And I said to her, the environment, although Maria Montessori said it was the third teacher, I think of it as being the first teacher, because if the environment is set up so that children really want to be in those learning spaces and the resources are really thought about carefully, the extended provision is really thought about carefully, then actually, I'm not suggesting we do, but we could just sit on the side and just watch and observe. And those children would still be learning a lot of things, a lot of skills. They wouldn't be getting the language though, would they, Claire?
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Catherine. And I'm just picking up on a question here that I think it's Jennifer has popped in about what kind of enhancements would we suggest outdoors. So if maybe we can sort of think about that back of what you've just said as well.
Well, it's the same with their outdoor area. Now, they're very lucky in China to have a proper outdoor area. Often it's on a roof, okay? Often it's a room that is made to be where the climbing frames are, etc., because the children actually can't get outside. Again, this setting, their outside area wasn't so great as indoors, equipment-wise. But again, really not utilising it as fully as they could. So let's talk about outdoor play.
Yeah, so that what you were saying there about the environment being the third teacher or the first teacher or whatever, actually I just have spent a couple of weeks ago with a very good friend outside New York, and she talks about environment being absolutely key to everything, and she's absolutely right. So your environment, if you set up your environment, think about, and I'm thinking about your question here, Jennifer, you need to set up your continuous provision. So you need to look at your environment, look at all, particularly outdoors, your ingredients. Your key ingredients outside will be your physical play, your wet play, your kind of messy sand, water, mud. Then you've got your loose parts play. You will have like den building stroke, and also role play, I think always merges in along with loose parts anyway, and it kind of role play happens and emerges everywhere. Then you've got your arts. In terms of your visual arts, you have your sound development, and I'm probably missing something, but that's more on your horticulture. So those are your kind of your main areas outdoors in terms of ingredients. You would be setting those up with the understanding from your curriculum. So those experts who write the curriculum for you across your 6 areas, or in England, the 7 areas that you talked about, you will go around with your plans and try and set up those different ingredients with as much knowledge as possible of how children learn and what I need to put into these areas in order to promote this continuous provision over the year. And then in order to look at enhancements, what you need to do is you need to look at your half-termly plans. So your 8-week plan from your scheme of work, for example, for maths. If you're focusing on numbers, for example, 1 to 10, if you're focusing on shape, if you're focusing on measures, then go around those areas in your outdoor space and look and make sure that you have at least 10 items in your, at least 10 different pots and pans, so that children, whenever they count, they can actually count those, that you have at least 10 different types of spoons. If they want to line them up, they can do so. that you have different types of little containers. If they want to fill them up, that there's at least 10. I'm saying at least 10 because I would never limit children's counting to a number like that, because many children can fill up 20 containers and comfortably count them. So 10 is just a base number for that. Again, if you're looking at measures, look, for example, in your loose parts, you might actually have the children bringing out like a pivot or a tire or a cylinder or a cuboid or something, and then setting a plank on it, and they can either stand on it themselves and go, you know, up and down and sort of move their feet marginally to make it tip over, so that's making it heavier on one side or lighter on the other side. You can even add bottles of water into that, where the children fill the bottles of water and set bottles on one side and bottles on the other, and 2 bottles is less than 4 bottles, and so on. And you can have them enhanced like that, but in a playful way, so that children have exposure to lots of kind of opportunities to, as you say, Catherine, almost learn in spite of an adult being there. The adult is there to facilitate that. We're there to think in advance, to set out the invitations. So the invitations are there for the children, or enhancements, but those invitations are loaded with intention. Those are set up intentionally to support this understanding of measures or whatever it is that you're working on through that particular program at that time. Does that make sense?
5-litre bottles, you know, the big detergent bottles, you get commercial detergent in. They've got a handle.
Yeah.
And those are fantastic for different weights, of bottles with different weights. Even tiny children, you know, 1-year-olds, we think, oh, something might be too heavy, but even 1-year-olds quite enjoy carrying around a bottle of heavy water.
Yeah. Also, we would very much be thinking about children's physical development there, and their whole sense of proprioception and deep sensory learning as well. So it's kind of, everything is merged. That's what you were saying about your curriculum. You don't see anything in isolation. Everything comes together and kind of interlinks.
And also it's about feeling those big, you know, feeling how big something is, how heavy something is, in a big way outside. Yeah. Whereas indoors, you may be teaching the same skills or giving the children the same opportunities to learn those skills, but in a different sort of way than you can if you're outside, I think.
Yeah. I'm just thinking then of the person that's in the composite P3-4 class, the numeracy coordinator there. Again, always thinking in the early years, in the sort of the preschool, year 1, year 2, we're looking at, you know, those non-standard units. So it's the small, medium, large containers and so on. But as you move on into Key Stage 1, make sure that you have containers with the metric marks on them, the litres, the millilitres, and the grams and the kilograms and so on. And that's your opportunity to sort of present that. So those big containers that you're talking about, Catherine, the 5-litre, the 2-litre, the 1-litre, the 50 millilitres, that those children have exposure to that. And whenever I was in the school, we were actually looking at the loose parts container for the children right through from age 4 to age 11. So those children, the 4-year-olds will still be exposed to all of those metric measures, but you just simply won't be focusing on them with them. But they are there. It's not as if we're going to hide them for 2 years and then just all of a sudden let them come into the picture. The children are exposed, and it becomes part of their kind of
natural progression.
Some of them will see the litres and the millilitres and be questioning those at age 5. They don't need to wait until they're 7. So it's to me, it's just such a
it's being stage appropriate, isn't it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But also having high expectations for children's learning, not restrict. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I agree about counting. It's just the numeral. I just make sure that people understand. It's just muddling the numerals up that I'm conscious of.
Does muddling numerals up at a very early stage, does that bother you, Catherine?
Sorry, say that again.
Very early stage, does it matter that the children muddle the numerals?
Well, I personally feel if a child has a good understanding, real knowledge of numbers 1 to 6, I'm not bothered about the counting, because children will count pro rote, and then children will count objects, won't they?
Yeah.
All right. And then children will put objects into sets. I'm being quite simplistic here. And then they'll have perhaps 2 sets. And they will latch on to something representing that set, that numeral that's representing that set. And I just feel if a child has a concrete understanding of what this is 6 and these are 6, and these 2 sets together make 6, and can recognize that numeral, it means that their neural pathways are joined up properly right from the start. They don't get, there's no confusion there. And then they can go on and learn 7, 8, 9, and 10. And so the 9 and the 6 just get separated, particularly if the child is dyslexic. And we don't necessarily know, you know, when they're very little, we don't actually know if they're dyslexic. And we're not like, we might never know if they're dyslexic. But I just think it avoids that. It avoids that confusion. And I personally would rather children have firm concepts before going on. And it's the same. I mean, in China, and I don't mean just China, Nigeria, Ghana, we work in India, we work in other countries as well, but these are the main ones. And I'm being quite judgmental across the board, but in my experience, you know, they love worksheets. You know, they get the children to write and recognize things very early on when they don't really understand what that means. That's what went wrong with my education as far as I was concerned. And if they wanted me to count things, I would have counted worms and woodlice. Okay. And I would have been interested in that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with my counting, but I might have understood if I knew that 2 2s were 2 lots of 2 woodlice or worms, then I would have understood what my times tables were about. And I think sometimes as educators, we move children on too quickly. When there are some children, I don't think planning should be done in advance. I know in a school that is done. In a nursery, I think the planning is done now on the spot. You know, a child has achieved this, so what can we do next with them in that line? All right. You know, if we can match 2 real objects, then let's see if we can match 2 pictures of those objects, for example. So yes, sorry if that's a bit of a long-winded answer, but that's my view. But your view is different, obviously.
No, it's not. What I was going to say was that in order to make those concepts very firm and very clear in children's minds, I do think that they need exposure to lots and lots of loose parts. And loose parts is a title and a word that has been bandied around over the last couple of years. It's kind of flavour of the month.
Yeah, it's become fashionable. The terminology has become fashionable.
The terminology has become
Although we've always played with bottle tops, haven't we?
Absolutely. But I think our understanding of loose parts has become much clearer now and why we need to play with them. So, you know, if you think about the child, very young child at home, maybe still in the high chair, and they get a banana and they put it up to their ear and they pretend it's a telephone. So that is very, very early sort of symbol recognition, children starting to see something in something else, pretend it is something else. And that is what numbers and letters are. They are symbols. And in order for children to get to a place to fully understand what symbols are, they need lots and lots of exposure to loose parts play and pretending that something is something else, so that they're wiring up the brain to think in that kind of sense. And that's what I often say to practitioners whenever you get children coming into the classroom, into the school. Some children can do and some children can't do. And we often wonder, why is that the case? Well, actually, if you really dig deep, it's probably because one child has had loads and loads of exposure to symbolic play with loose parts at home, whereas other children haven't had that. They've actually had toys that are actually preconceived toys that have a one purpose agenda. they will only do one thing, or sometimes parents fall into the trap of buying toys that are very educationally driven. They're very focused on counting and colour recognition. So the children come in very clear, kind of they know all these facts, but they don't have a good, deep understanding below the surface. It looks as if they're incredibly smart at the beginning, and then all of a sudden they start to tail off.
And that I think is really, really sad. Because I think children want to please their parents, and they will find or teacher or practitioner, and they will find a way of satisfying that adult. But they've lost out on the fundamentals of learning that in a more constructive stage by stage way. And a lot can be presumed, and that's really, I find that personally very sad when that happens. And I think as educators, and the audience being very quiet, please shout me down, but as educators we have a duty to also educate parents and help parents be stage appropriate, so they're actually not asking their child to do something before they're ready, purely for what I've just said, because the child will find a way of pleasing them. And that's what we're very conscious about in our software, to help parents understand that, you know, child doesn't have to write, you don't have to learn your numbers, you know, you can do all these other things, all these pre-maths perhaps, because we talk about pre-reading, don't we? And we talk about pre-writing. I've just brought pre-maths in, but it's all maths. There is no pre-maths, everything but more practical maths, more useful maths in many ways for the child at their stage of development. What do people think? Let's have some comments in the chat. So sorry, I'm very passionate about helping parents, because I think every parent wants the best for their child, but they don't have the training or the expertise as we do, although they could be a nurse like Claire's mum and be quite natural about it. But even so, with a bit of help and support, they could do it even better if they know what stage comes next. Nobody's commenting.
Just something that I've been reading, and I'm just going to show it. I'm going to share the book.
This book.
Yeah, I love this. It's actually How Children Learn and Create Using Art, Play and Science. It's by Sabine Plamper and Annette Wetterings. They're Dutch people, ladies. Absolutely beautiful. Loads of gorgeous illustrations.
Pictures, yes.
Very much.
I've heard about this book.
It's gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. But whenever I was looking at it, and even looking at that picture of the child dripping wallpaper paste off the spatula, you're looking at that and you're thinking, right, you know what? And he spends his time, you read that, and he does it over and over again, ladens up the spatula with wallpaper paste and just watches it dripping. And as I was reading that, I was actually thinking that is such a mathematical experience as well as scientific. You know, looking at how long does it take the drip to come out, to detach from the spatula. And that's what he was doing, actually, watching and watching that drip and waiting for that to detach. That takes time. It takes
also, it could be linked to a schema, couldn't it?
Absolutely, that whole trajectory and movement and so on. But absolutely beautiful little book. Looking at how young children learn through all of that art, play and science. But really, it's very, very mathematical. Every single page in that is laden with maths if we just know how to look for it.
Yes. Somebody's written in the chat, parental engagement is so key, and partnership working together to support learning. I agree with you on that. And also, I think if the parent understands what you're actually facilitating, I tend to use the word facilitate rather than teach. If the parent understands what you're facilitating, then they can join in and do the same at home. Because a lot of children compartmentalise, they put their lives in silos, particularly if they have special educational needs. You know, something can be called something in one place when it's exactly the same thing is put in a different place and it's called something else. So I think, you know, helping children understand concepts in different places, they're the same. You know, children ask the question, why, because they want the reassurance from different people. They want the reassurance that they're going to get pretty much the same answer. And I think it's the same for learning objectives. You know, if they can be played out in different contexts with us and then include the parents and the home environment, I think that makes it much stronger for the child, and more importantly, a really important part of their learning process. And also parents can really understand what their child is learning. You know, I had parents come into my nurseries saying, my child's not learning anything, or I want my child to write their name, was a classic. But if parents are involved and they understand the different stages, they then appreciate the learning, and they also appreciate what they are doing to help build their child's brain. You know, they actually have a part to play. It's not just about feeding, bathing and clothing your child and possibly sitting them in front of a TV, all right, or an iPad or what have you. You know, there is I think there needs to be more of a responsibility for parents now to grasp the learning and take it on board themselves, so that they can actually help their child learn a lot as well. And it's not just our job as educators.
Mm-hmm. And I think parents just want some ideas about what maths looks like and what they can do to support children with maths. And it's really and truly, it is about what can they do around, okay, if you're doing the laundry, can they sort socks for you? Can they match up the socks? Can they put the pairs together?
Yeah.
Is there one missing? Can they find the missing one? Can they help tidy up and put things away, even empty the dishwasher, put all the knives into one part of the tray, put the forks beside the knives? Can you put the spoons beside the forks, to the right of the forks? All that positional language. Can you put the lids on the saucepans? Which lids belong to which saucepan? And that is maths for young children. And whenever parents realise that is maths for young children, parents will say, oh, I can do that. I can support that, because we've taken the mistake out of it. It is not what they think of maths. They probably think of maths the way you think of maths, Catherine.
Addition and multiplication.
And we are certainly not going there, but we are talking about subtraction.
Yeah.
A lovely thing that I used to do with my children was driving along in the car, and you would see a van. I can see it still in front of me, a white van, and they would always look for the white van. And whenever the van would start to brake, then 2 more lights in the top would come on. So now there would be 4 red lights. And then he would take his foot off the brake, and they'd be saying, oh, there's only 2 now. There's only 2 lights. And I'd say, well, where did they go? And so there's already the subtraction. There was 4, and now there's 2 away, and there's only 2 left. We talked about the number plates. They called out the numbers that they would see, and then it became who could get the number said out fastest. They talked about there's letters in the number plate. They talked about the symbols on the vans. They talked about the wheels. And sometimes some vans would have like kind of bigger, like 2 sets of wheels. And lorries might have 6 or 8 wheels, so they would start to count all of that. And that is just incidental stuff as you drive along in the car. But the problem now for many children sitting in cars going somewhere is that they're sitting on an iPhone, or they're on a tablet, or they have a little screen strapped to the back of the seat, so they're not seeing anything outside of the car, and they're not having that 2-way interaction with their parent, with a human being actually talking back to them. They might be getting some kind of stimulus on the iPad or the tablet, but they're not having an opportunity to actually engage back with that. So those are the simple things that parents can do, and really sort of help them through look at that, see, you know, can you just even spend 5 minutes on a journey with children talking about that? Just about all the different cars, and then it's amazing to see happy cars and sad cars, because if you look at the grills in the front of cars, some of them look as if they're smiling and some are frowning, and all those things become little things that children become interested in and notice.
Something we used to do, I mean, we did a lot of cooking in our nurseries. I don't actually have the nurseries anymore. We did a lot of cooking, and we cooked in small groups. So everybody had a chance to cook, you know, on a regular basis, but we cooked in small groups, and every child had their own bowl, their own spoon, their own whisk, or what have you. And we would weigh things and see how things changed. And actually, it was so mathematical, but nobody really appreciated it. You know, it was all about making the end product. It wasn't about how much flour. People didn't think of it as a mathematical activity. They saw it more as knowledge and understanding of the world, rather than as a mathematical activity.
And I think there's a skill as well, Catherine. You need to be careful whenever you're doing something like that, that you don't, I always say, you don't suck children's souls out either by killing the fun in it, killing the playfulness. You have to be kind of very, very clever about how you subtly bring in all the maths and all the world around us, or their knowledge and understanding of the world, in a playful way. So I talk about being mindfully playful with children. I think it's kind of, how do you do that in a very mindful, playful way without kind of turning children off or making them want to go somewhere else? So it's, you know, really clever, sort of subtle interventions, interactions with the children. As Julie Fisher says, you know, you really do have to walk that very, very fine line with children to not interfere in their interactions with the materials and with the environment. So it's just kind of treading gentle.
Yeah, I get your point. I mean, cooking, I suppose, is a more formal set activity, isn't it? Other in comparison to the mud kitchen, or the sand tray, or the water tray. Yeah, I understand that. That's true. And I mean, I think that's also a challenge, isn't it? We can provide the language, but when do we? You know, if we're thinking of, let's say a child is playing in the sand tray or the water tray, and they're measuring things, of working out how many jugs will fit in this big jug or whatever. You know, when do you step in?
Yeah.
You know, how do you extend that without taking away the child's enjoyment, or, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I always think that you need to have your chair sitting in at the sand or the water tray. You need to right in and almost play there alongside the child for quite some time before you say anything. Just be beside them and maybe talk about what you're doing rather than what they're doing. So it's very subtle intervention.
Like modeling it.
Yeah. Sometimes say nothing. Sometimes just leave it. Sometimes it's best to say nothing, but maybe come back to the sort of the whole experience later, and this time you lead it and say, do you know, I saw you doing that earlier and I was curious about that. So just come back to it at a point rather than interfering in that special moment that child's having at that moment in time. Fill and empty buckets in a water tray for 25 minutes. He filled the buckets right up to the very top, and he let it drip, drip, drip into the very top. It was almost, the precision was phenomenal to watch. And then he just took it and tipped it out again, and then he did it again. And I thought, when do we intervene in that? And then I thought, no, just leave him be. Actually,
it's about giving children time, isn't it, to process their thoughts. And I think we can step in too quick and spoil that. Bearing in mind that if a child is really engaged with something, then they really are learning something from it.
With the glue dropping off the spatula, they are totally learning something. They are investigating. They are scientists at that moment in time, and they don't need us to be yapping here, for want of a better word.
I mean, there is, I think there's also sometimes educators find it quite difficult to stand back and just watch, either because they might be perceived as not doing their job if they're not in there saying and doing and, you know, getting involved, or they feel uncomfortable that actually by observing is just as important, possibly more so, because you'd be planning and scaffolding and thinking about what you're going to be providing for the child next. If you sat back, I think educators find it quite difficult to sit back and just watch, in my experience.
And they often will say to me, we are afraid that somebody thinks we're lazy if we're not in there. So, you know, sometimes it is just nice to step back, and I'm saying to them at that point, that's your time to do an observation. Take a little observation whenever you have that little moment, that special moment to watch a child. And I think it is a gift to be able to sit and watch children. I really do. And I think anybody that knows me tonight on this knows that I am totally passionate about observation and assessment. So, you know, I just think that it is a gift to get time to be able to do that.
Yeah, and recognising the small milestones that are actually happening right in front of you. I think I have this thing that, how do I put it? With our software, children just fall into doing the next thing, you know, because it is a stage by stage, but not. I'm not saying it's not. Greg Bottrell. Do you know Greg Bottrell?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, he looked at Spark and he said it's not it's not. I can't think of the word he used. But it's not prescriptive. You know, there's lots of choice and you choose what's right for the child. Right? It's not you've got to do this and you've got to do this and you've got to do that. It's nothing like that. I don't want to give that impression. But the fact that practitioners know what the next bit is could be the child almost falls into it without the practitioner even doing much, but they recognize it. They recognize this child just made this big discovery, or they now can do this skill which they hadn't been able to do before or hadn't noticed that they could do before. And I find that's how learning should be for the children, I feel. Effortless.
Yeah.
For everybody. And that's what makes it such a joy, isn't it? I'm looking at the time. Well, we are just over an hour, or we're just coming up to the hour, really. Come on, folks, in the chat. Let's have some questions for Claire. Is there anything you'd like to ask or comment on? Or this is no different to a normal group. Either people have lots of things going on in their brains and they don't think of anything at the time. And if you think of anything later, you're welcome to. I'm sure Claire would be only too happy to hear your questions. Anybody got a comment? No? Okay. Well, I'm going to, in a moment, I'm going to play a little as outgoing film. It has, I couldn't get over how much is on Claire's website, to be fair. And I've only picked out some things. There's loads of things to see on Claire's website. And there's also a little bit about the two courses, or the workshops, are they, Claire?
Yeah, one is about organisation of materials and storage. This has become quite a kind of a topical sort of issue here with our schools and settings. I suppose as people move outdoors more and more, they're kind of thinking more about how do I organise this and manage it. So it's just a 30-minute webinar because people have asked. I posted a message on LinkedIn and I think there was 80 people came back with questions and comments from all over the world, actually. So I thought, right, I'll run a little webinar on that. So I'm delighted people have come forward for that, so that's free. And then the other one is a math session on the back of this. It's really, it'll be a wee bit more sort of like a training session for practitioners. If they're come on that session, obviously they have to pay for that one. But it really will be looking at how we deliver a prescriptive curriculum in a non-prescriptive manner. So that's basically what we're talking about tonight.
Okay. This might help the person called JH. I just find the individual planning / development for maths difficult with so many children.
Yeah. Okay. So that, yeah, I would say, Jennifer, this would be very much looking at how to deliver that curriculum in a playful, non-prescriptive manner. And this is something actually that I did in the south of Ireland a number of years ago, whenever they introduced the Ashter framework, which was their preschool document. And the sort of the question that they posed to me at that stage was to write a training program for them that would deliver the Ashter document in a non-prescriptive way. So that's so really I've been doing that for quite a number of years now, looking at how to do that. I suppose that's what my work is all about. Just has been even into primary school during their play sessions, whenever they do have to engage in more formal learning, I still look at how can you do this in a playful way and in a mindfully playful way.
Yeah, I love that term, mindfully. Mindfully playful. Somebody said, I think it's been muted. We haven't muted anything. So I'm sorry if something's gone wrong for you, but you will get the recording, so don't worry. Okay, Claire, thank you very, very much indeed. It's been lovely talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you for a great reminder about keeping it simple, being open to the possibilities of mathematics playful, and tuning into each child to playfully support and extend learning. Yeah,